Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important conference. I'm very pleased to talk to you on the completely different subject what you have heard before. Now I talk about sustainable energy and climate change, and will also try to give some answers to tell you why we need a global governance on both issues. First of all, I like to thank the organizers for this introduction, also for the very kind invitation. And I have to say I'm now the director of the Department Energy, Transportation, Environment at the German Institute of Economic Research of 2004. And I moved to Hertie School of Governance last year. It's sometimes when you change position, it's not updated everywhere. Now, I would like to start to give you some empirical but also some scientific evidence of what the whole problem of sustainable energy and climate change really means. So I now try to get this technology right. And the society is facing two main challenges. And the first challenge, I would say, is fossil fuel scarcity. That's not a new subject, but it's a subject which now comes onto the topic more than ever, because we are facing really a difficulty which is now coming, I would say, in the next 10 years. And because of this, we know that, of course, fossil fuel is scarce, primarily oil is scarce, and the global oil market, of course, has some difficulties and also challenges in front of them, and we have to find solution out of it. And the main difficulty with the overall oil market is, of course, that we are heavily dependent on oil. All economies, primarily, of course, industrialized economies, but primarily also fast-growing economies like China, India, and also Russia, demands more and more oil. And the oil supply right now is at I would say, at a stage where we have already facing the limits. We are now producing per day approximately 85 billion barrels per day. And we know that we can extend it, and we have to extend it because of the fast-growing countries and the demand increase, up to 100 million barrels a day. But we only can reach this if we invest heavily in very expensive oil exploration fields. That means permafrost area, deep sea, deep ocean, all these fields which we know which exist, but which needs to substitute those fields which will decline in the next 10 years. And this is primarily, of course, those fields in Europe, like Norway, but also Russia, US, and we know in Saudi Arabia a lot of oil is still there, but we cannot rely purely on the OPEC countries. So for this, we know that, for example, in Brazil, we have to find new areas and new oil fields, and we have to invest intensively. And we know that oil demand will almost double in the next 30 years. We have to find a way to meet the demand, the global rising energy demand. Oil is only one part of it, but of course we have to face where is the oil coming from and how do we really spend the money in the right direction. And this primarily is a huge subject, and I have given you here, and I'm sure you can have the slides after the presentation, some numbers. If we see here the global energy demand, it's a projection by 2030 from the International Energy Agency telling us which region in the world will increase their demand. And of course we see us trying to reduce a little bit our oil demand. You see this very small piece at the OECD, it's a red piece here, which is just a little bit of the oil demand decline because of energy saving and energy efficiency and trying to substitute oil. But we know in order to substitute oil, we need to have at least 30 to 40 years really to come over and find new technologies, substitution, energy saving, energy efficiency improvement. That takes time. And this is the reason why we see that the huge increase of energy demand, for example, like here in India and China, really causes the difficulty we are facing now. China, for example, you see here as well, is, of course, rising. It's an economy of growth. It's a fast-growing country, of course. And now China is facing their energy demand and also delivering most of them with coal. 80% of the energy production in China is based on coal. burning coal causes a lot of greenhouse gases. And because of this, and this is the second challenge I will tell you later on, it's climate change, which we are causing with this kind of energy structure. And if we are now looking at the numbers, who's rising the energy demand, of course we see the large part is again coal. Oil is scarce and expensive, and we have to find alternatives. Coal is not scarce. We have it in all regions of the world, like in Australia, USA, Europe, everywhere. It's not that expensive. However, if we do not find a global solution on climate change and climate policy, then we will burn all the coal we will have the next 200 years, and this causes a climate change which we really cannot bear. So we have to find alternatives, and we have to find solutions. And this is why, on the one hand, we have to solve the energy system and the energy demand and the whole energy market. On the other hand, we have to face that climate change causes also major difficulties. And we need a lot of investment. Here, a projection by 2030, again, the next 20 years, we see that we have to invest a lot of money. Not only in power, new power plants, for example, like gas power plants and, for example, coal power plants. Nuclear, I would say, not so much, but we have to find also alternatives here, and this is a global number. And also what we need, of course, is infrastructure transmission of energy, which has the same share of investment we have to find here. So the largest part, 50% of the next investment in the 20 years, is going into the power sector. And oil, of course. We could say, okay, we say goodbye to oil. That's not that easy, because oil we use primarily for transportation and for heating in buildings. We cannot really insulate all buildings on the world immediately in order to reduce energy efficiency or do more for energy saving. This needs time again. This needs 20, 30 years and a lot of investment. And to find alternatives to oil for transportation means electromobility, means, for example, water, hydrogen-based, whatever kind of fuels we need. This needs, of course, also technology innovation. This needs a lot of investment, and it needs time. So the major issue here is the scarcest resource we have is time. And we see that we have to spend also investments into the oil because the demand is increasing substantially the next 20 years. And we have to get all the oil out of the ground, out of the oil seeds, tar sands, and whatever. A lot of dirty and energy-wasting technology to get oil out of sands. But we have to do it because we do not have the technology alternative, not ready. In order to have it, we would have needed to start 30 years ago in order to be now in a position to substitute oil. So we need oil, we need to invest into oil. It would be better to invest in new technology, but we don't have the money. So on the one hand, oil is more scarce. Gas is not that scarce. However, we have to find also here, we have to explore gas, new gas fields, like in Russia. Russia, Iran are the two major countries where the gas is coming from. We have already a little bit of a monopolistic market, of course, because Russia is a dominant player. Iran is not really politically so stable that we would say, okay, we stick our reliance on the future gas only on Iran. I would not recommend it. And then we see we also have to invest into new technologies, like biofuels, like energy efficiency, like new renewable energy technologies, all this. And for this, of course, we need a large amount of investments. The oil market, as I already said, has a major difficulty we have to face. Not only scarcity, which we see here, we know which oil fields are existent on the world. Geologists tell us where we find them. However, first of all, we have to invest. The oil price was last year very down because of the financial crisis, and the companies do not invest if the oil price is below a level of $70 per barrel. So we need a high oil price in order to invest into this new expansive oil fields. This is one part of it. The second one is that we have to find also non-conventional oil, like this oil sands and tar sands. On the other hand, we have this red area here with a big question mark. We don't know. We hope that technological progress will help us to fill the gap and to find the new investment into new oil fields, crude oil fields, which needs to be found. Sounds a little bit strange in a time of technology where we pretty much know how the Earth is constructed and where we could find it. Nevertheless, we see that the demand will increase and the supply, we don't know. But we have to, in order, otherwise we will face an energy crisis we should really avoid. And then climate change. Briefly, climate change, as I already said, of course, primarily by burning coal, by burning fossil fuel, we cause a lot of CO2 emissions. Here we see that the global CO2 emissions will increase in the next 20 years. This is because right now, everything we do right now causes the climate in the next 30 to 40 years. We cannot change it anymore because we have a time gap, a delay. Whatever we do right now, if we install a lot of coal power plants, they produce a lot of greenhouse gases for the next decades. We cannot do much about it. But what we can do is to now decide what we want to do after 2050. So whatever we do right now, we can have a change, a turning point in 2050. And here you see the picture by 2030, which is increasing, of course. The CO2 emissions by fossil fuel is increasing. Coal, of course, the share of coal is increasing. And if we do not find technologies for coal, carbon capture and sequestration, where we, for example, take the CO2, put it below the Earth, and hope it will stay there, we have to find technology solutions in order to reduce emissions. And, of course, we have to do it right now. So this is the reason that I will tell later on a little bit more about it, that we should not do wait and see and think, okay, we wait and then we will see what kind of technology we will have. We have to act now. You might have heard about the so-called Stern report. Lord Stern is an economist, previously at World Bank, who did a study for the UK Financial Ministry. And he's a financial economist. This is very important. He did a study on the cost of climate change. You might have heard about it. There's a big discussion between economists whether this is the right number or not, but the major question is, what does climate change cost? And it costs a lot. Especially if we do not do anything about climate protection, the extreme climate events will increase, like heavy storms, like heavy rainfalls causing also destruction of infrastructure and so on. So we have a lot of damages which were caused by extreme climate events. And these kind of extreme climate events will also take place after 2050. This makes it so complicated why we have to act right now for a time period where all politicians, not all of us, but most of us are dead. And after 2050, we know then the cost of climate change will dramatically increase if we do not do anything about it. And Stern said it could cost by 2100 already 20% of the global GDP. And if we would act right now and try to reduce the emissions and the global warming, then the damages would decline and we would have a benefit up to 20% of global GDP. It's not a question whether this is a right number or wrong number. Of course, you can say if you take other assumptions, it could be 10% of GDP or whatever. The major point is here that we have to face that climate change will cause changes, and this, of course, will also cause damages. And if we are doing a clever policy, a global policy, climate protection policy, these costs would be much lower. You saw already we need to invest now, also in the energy system, transportation system, mobility system. Take these investments, go into the green markets, and that's the right way to go. And these costs are then much lower as if we would wait now for the next 40 years and then say, oh, now we have to do something. We have to do something against the oil scarcity. You cannot, it takes 30 to 40 years to install a power plant, to insulate all the buildings, to find new technologies, to change the infrastructure, to change mobility patterns and all this. It takes decades, so we have to start now. Of course, climate policy is an important aspect and needs to be global, of course. However, we saw in Copenhagen that it's difficult to find a global agreement right now, of several reasons. I've been involved into it and also in the preparation for the EU President Barroso. We had a good starting point, but at the end we saw that the whole conference was so overwhelmed with too many issues. We already have some difficulties, of course, at the world scale. You talk about it here over the whole day and the next days. Of course, we have poverty differences, hunger, all these different areas of globalization which causes difficulties. And of course, the developing countries try to really face this all also on climate policy. But we saw that it's overwhelmed. So my idea is here to split the two issues. The first is climate protection and emission reduction at the G20 level. Because there we have all the major emitters, like China, for example, is also a major emitter. Although per capita they produce much less emissions than we do, of course. There are many people and not that industrialized as we are. However, in the absolute number, China is already the number one of greenhouse gas emitters. And G20, they already agreed on a climate protection goal. And here we could also share the effort, who's doing what and when, how to protect the climate by 2050 and afterward. And here we need binding agreements. And at the UN level, as we did right now in Copenhagen, we should take care of the developing countries and their needs, especially on adaptation. Meaning that adaptation means we have to prevent climate change, building dikes, water management system, all this. And we should do this on a global level and also include developing countries and find solutions here. So I think that would be a wise idea to reduce the really dense structure of this 195 countries finding an agreement where everybody has to commit and say yes in order to really help the climate policy process going on. I hope so we will make it. Now, in order to find the solution, I already said there's a long way to go. However, we have to start now. And climate protection is economically also efficient if we start as soon as possible. Of course, the investments need to be taken in energy saving, in buildings, mobility. CO2-free, safe, affordable energy is, of course, crucial, meaning also environmentally more friendly coal technology, like CCS, carbon capture sequestration, of course, renewable energy, sustainable mobility, and the list is long. But however, we have to start now and have to really put the directions into the green markets. And we think that the economic potentials are huge if we start right now, that the markets are really attractive also for big global players, and the climate protection offers a lot of market advantages. Now, after the crisis, the country said we need to invest a certain amount into some areas. And here we see there's an international study comparing which country also invested in which direction. And for us it was interesting, where's the direction, which investment were really green investment. And green means here all the technologies I just mentioned, energy efficiency, power production, renewable energy, sustainable mobility, the whole list. And we saw, interestingly, that it was not Europe, as I was thinking, which invested the largest amount for green technology. It was South Korea. And that's interesting. You see, some countries like South Korea and also China, they spent a large amount of money into the new markets. Why? They say, okay, this is a chance for us to go into the right markets. We would like to become a world leader on the new technology. This is clever. And it's right. And I think all countries and all regions should do the same because we do not have much time. Time of cheap energy is over, of course. We have to face that fossil fuel becomes scarce and expensive. And we should not wait and see. We urgently need CO2-free, safe and affordable energy. As I already said, we don't have time anymore. And the technological breakthrough, of course, technology is crucial. However, we also have not only to invest into research, not only into R&D, but also in concrete projects. And of course, renewable energy plays a crucial role. There are different studies showing us which technology market share might be realistic in the future. I mean, there are different kind of studies, how you solve the whole problem. Of course, energy saving is the first and foremost and most efficient way to go for. And to really stop energy waste. This is a major message also for those countries who subsidize fossil fuel. Still happening all over the world. They subsidize fossil fuel, keep it artificially cheap, which is wrong. So we need really alternatives, and we have to not only have high energy prices, which is not the message. that we have to wait for high energy prices and then change. We don't have the time. It's not that easy. So we have a mixture of energy saving, renewable energy, nuclear we will see. I mean, it's only a very small part because nuclear has other difficulties and cannot really play a large role, a small role. We have the waste issues, we have the environmental damage, and the cost. It's not a cheap technology. And here we did a study on the market potentials of the new markets, of the emerging climate markets, of course, and we see that already in the next 2 decades there's a huge potential. And this market potential, I mean, there are several global players, not only German firms, also international firms who really now go into these new markets. It's not only sustainable mobility, it's also this classical power, investment power, supply and energy efficiency, and resource and material efficiency as well as recycling, which also plays a crucial role. Now, that's my final statement. The reason why I called it why we need a global governance is, of course, that on the one hand we have a financial crisis. I'm sorry. We have a financial crisis and we have to find ways out of it. We need to go into the new green investments, which have really high growth potential. And if we see we invest into the right directions, it could also bring a market benefit. And we can really have a way out of the crisis. We need to solve this 3 crises, the energy crisis again, then also energy saving, of course, energy efficiency improvement, which is really important, and alternatives of oil and fossil fuels. So, of course, renewable energy here plays a crucial role. And then we can really solve the major challenge that fossil fuel becomes scarce and expensive. And in the long term, which is then really 32 years to 50 years, we have to also solve the climate crisis, so to say, to mitigate emissions on the one hand and also adapt to climate change, meaning we have to prepare in order to reduce costs. And that's for now. I'm looking forward to hear your questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Just go ahead. Microphone. Here is it.
Many thanks for an interesting speech. When I was in Copenhagen, my kind of little resume was that the developing world is still not ready yet to fully admit to their historical responsibility, which was the major problem between the US, the China, and also the EU, which played a kind of weird role also with coming up with that 20 to 30% target and then not really living up to it in the end. So would you actually agree to that? That if someone is to blame here, is still the developed world, and with China, yes, being number one, but they are not by far not there yet, where the industrialized world emitted the 450 parts per million CO2, what the current budget is and the problem is.
I mean, this is a very important aspect because this is so-called carbon justice. Because from looking at the past, we are already have eaten much of the cake. The others still start now to eat the cake. And we tell them, stop eating the cake because the cake is not good. That's what's happening in Copenhagen. That's the wrong strategy, I agree. Because per capita, the US is 20 ton per capita per year, and China is, I would say, 4 or 5. We are in the middle by 10. So if we're looking at the past, we have to face, we are first to reduce emissions, and we have to do it. And for this, I'm not that pessimistic than you, primarily because I'm very much involved in the political progress. And I lived in the US and know that they are doing a lot, although from the outside it looks like, okay, they are not doing enough, of course. However, for the US, it's really a big step what they are doing. And there I'm quite optimistic that we get a solution within the G20. China, I have a different picture because we have so many discussions with them and I went there and I understood a lot what they are doing. they are prepared to be the technology leader, and they don't want that anybody else looks at what they are doing. This is simply like this. And they don't want to be in a G20 position saying, well, we are now doing the technology breakthrough. They are doing. I know, because I went there. And they are much far away than we think they are. And I would say Europe and the USA is wrong when saying, okay, China is far, far away from us. They are not. They are already very close. And we have to be careful not to lose the market position in here. So I think they're doing a lot, and that's a good strategy. And it's a little bit more easy for China than for us in a big democracy to find all the majorities we need and all the different positions, lobbyism, energy lobbies, and all this, to find a solution at the end. And China is a little bit easier to say, now we insulate all the buildings, we invest. They are growing so fast. They have a lot of capital investment ready, and they do it. They could do more, of course, but they are not willing to share this on a global arena. That's the major thing. And for this, I think we should start with G20 to find a solution here, and I'm sure that we could. And then developing countries, I'm sure that they have rights to say what they want, and we have on the UN level the responsibility to help them. And the adaptation fund is one important aspect. Also, other needs which we have to face. However, this global solution, what some economists say, we have to find a solution for all of them. I'm not so optimistic to find a solution. Okay.
How economically viable and how interesting is Brazilian ethanol for Europe?
Ethanol?
Yeah.
In Germany, we have a special program. We have already some share of ethanol fuels and fuel stations who offer ethanol. However, the production is not that efficient, like, for example, like in Brazil. They have a comparative advantage, but the technology is ready. I would say it's not so attractive for Europe as a whole. In some areas, yes, but I would see more chances for other fuels. Not so much on ethanol. It's a very small part right now. The share will probably a little bit increase, but not so much. I would see more chances now for like electromobility. There are many governments now in Europe who invest a lot of money into it. The only way why this is so and not hydrogen and other fuels or like ethanol is coming through is primarily because the companies support electromobility. They have the technology ready. It's not a completely infrastructure change you need, because for ethanol you need new power stations and all this, although you can fuel the car also with different kind of fuels, with ethanol and also conventional gasoline. But electromobility is a big step. However, already some companies offer the plugs. We have the electricity. The cars are ready. So everybody is moving in this direction simply because the firms are going in this direction. And ethanol, I think, will be more and more only one part and small fraction out of it.
Thank you for your presentation, and I have a question about your chart that's showing the demand for the next 30 years or 50 years, and I wanted to know whether the demand for energy is kind of a cycle as the economic cycle. Like, for example, if you look at the history of Europe or South Korea or Japan, they have like a big increase and then decrease of energy demand, and that happens with economic growth too. So I'm not sure whether in the next 100 years Africa will be the biggest energy demand for the whole world, and that's the first question, whether it's an unavoidable cycle with the economic growth. And the second is from like Europe or the history of Germany, like is doing very well with this kind of environmental friendly thing. And then do you think it's more like from up to down, from the government to the company, or it's like economically the energy become more expensive and then they automatically starting to do the energy research?
So the first question was, I have shown the slides for the next 2 decades, and we cannot do much about it. You're right, there's a circle. However, I mean, because of the financial crisis, now we have a little bit of a decline, but that will be over, I would say, in 4 or 5 years, and it will steeply go up. China all over the crisis had an increase of energy demand of 10% per year. Because of not only because of what's happening there, but because of growth. And here we see that the huge demand in fast-growing countries will overwhelm the whole market. And this is true for the next 50 years, I would say, and in economic terms, of course, because we know these countries will grow, although there could be a little bit of a cycle, but the tendency is really going up. And this is what we know. We know that in 20 to 30 years, global energy demand will double. And this is the number we have to face. Whether it's really doubling, a little bit less, so we will see, but it will be a huge increase. After it, you're right, we have to see who's really becoming a world leader, also on energy technology, on fast-growing nations. I would not see Africa in that position because in 50 years we already know what from the energy terms is going on. But now with new solar projects, for example, like what we see right now with Desertec, the solar projects are intended to construct in Africa. They might become more wealthy than they are right now. They need to have energy access, which is not there right now. They have to find also, they need to have access to clean water, all these, and become less or more wealthy in the future, and then it might grow, but not to that large extent as the other nations. I would not see that, although it would be great to have it. Climate change will cause the major damages to Africa. That's for sure. And we cannot really protect the whole climate change, but Africa will be the most suffering nation, but also Asia and other regions. So if we do not change our system, then of course we will cause more difficulties, and Africa is one of those regions who face really the most severe negative impacts. The second question was it because of the government that we are now leading environmental technologies? Yes, I would say in the past, because in Germany, for example, we started already in the 70s with the new governmental ideas of recycling, water, efficient power production and all this. And this brings us a market advantage. But right now other nations are following, like China, USA, South Korea, and they want to do the same. So on the one hand, it's, as I told you, also because of the investment which is spent now for the economic crisis to overcome the economic crisis. On the other hand, the political system, but then the markets need to come. And this is what we see right now. We are on a turning point that firms invest heavily into green technology. These are global players, not only German firms. And this has nothing to do with the global governance on climate because it failed. It has to do with new markets which emerge. Oh, we have 10 questions.
Okay, thank you for taking our answers, first of all. Our questions, sorry. My question would be, just after Copenhagen, you could read in a lot of newspapers that somehow Copenhagen failed because the Western world didn't get its numbers straight and didn't agree to pay the amount of aid it was, or it promised the developing countries. What do you think of that?
Should I immediately answer? Should we collect? Yeah, I have 5 minutes. So we collect. Yeah.
Thank you. You addressed both the market issues in your speech and also the empirical and scientific evidence. Now, from a point of view of applied sciences and from the point of view of competition in the market and diplomacy, you just told us that China is doing a lot, but it is not willing to share it. And we know that the European Union is trying to raise the R&D percentages, and there are a lot of European projects that focus on renewable energy saving, and green technologies. Now, which are the projects that you mentioned on top of the R&D that should be focused on from a point of view of starting cooperation with China instead of trying to compete and having less of an opportunity due to their scale?
Thanks for the lecture. I was just thinking that I could actually hear the sharp intake of breath and cups being knocked over in cabinet offices up and around the world, in national governments, with your conclusion, we need world governance. Can you explain exactly what you mean, the difference between world governance and world government? Because I think it is something that people do get confused at.
Yeah. More? Oh.
Maybe one more from this side.
Hi, I have a question going back to the issue of biofuels, and you did say that obviously Europe, perhaps that's not a big market, but in Brazil, obviously that's being focused on a lot. And my question is, what is the question of biofuels in regards to meeting global demand, and what effect does that have on world hunger?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah. The first one was about Copenhagen, and it could be failed because the developing countries did not get much money. That's not what I really have observed. I mean, of course, developing countries always demand a lot of financial support to solve the issues right now, but also in the future because of climate change. And, of course, the financial crisis did not really make the industrialized countries in a position saying, well, we spend a lot of money now for the adaptation fund. However, my interpretation was because it failed, that not the developing countries said the industrialized countries should pay more. It failed because they said the industrialized countries should cut emissions drastically. And they didn't see much or enough effort in their view, because they want to have emission reduction by 80% by 2020. And this obviously is difficult. This was why I suggest to put it in G20 to find a solution for emission cuts, and then UN level on adaptation, which is less difficult. The second was on policy and the projects you would mention in the cooperation with China. I mean, Europe and also other nations cooperate with China on many issues, but the largest part I would see right now is renewable energy. And especially, well, China already is installing a lot of wind capacity all over the world, not only in China, and they have a certain target, but renewable energy is one project which is important. But then I would see the most important energy project is CCS, carbon capture sequestration. The EU funds now also projects in Germany. We have to find out whether the technology is ready, what efficiency losses this cause, how expensive it is, and also to find out if the CO2 can be stored in the base, and what kind of difficulties this cause. So this is, I would say, very important, because China right now based their energy production to 80% on coal. And this cannot be changed immediately. And we need a technology solution which makes coal more environmental friendly, whatever this means. I know in Germany we have difficulties with this CCS law because the people don't want it. But on a global scale, it's really important. It's Australia, it's the US, it's China, where we need this technology soon. Governance, it's not government. Because governance is really what I said, that we have to find global solutions. I mean, of course, we have to look for local solutions in order to go the step-by-step approach, but without global rules and guidelines, we will not make it. Copenhagen has shown that we need really long-term, rules in order to give the certainty, not only for firms, for all actors, that climate change will cause severe difficulties, and we have to find a global protection governance, and whatever this means, but there should be a global agreement on it, that we have to work on it. And I see some light at the end of the tunnel to find a solution. On the other hand, with energy, it's more difficult, because right now we are already in a position where we cannot really control it in a way we should do it, because there are so many different monopoly reactions, like OPEC, like Iran, like all this Russia, all this player on the energy market, which makes it really difficult and complicated. And with a global governance, it would be a desire, but I don't see it really. However, we have to look at the global scale in order to face the problems this cause. And for us, as a major energy importer, we have to take solution out of it, because it's no way out of it. We are in the middle of the train, we have to go, and we have to find solutions. And it would be really beneficial to have global solutions, a global governance on it. But for climate protection, I would say it's more realistic to find. But I don't mean a government, one institution like World Bank now controlling everything. This is not what I'm saying. I'm really saying we need rules, which needs to be implemented in different regions of the world. Biofuel was the last one. Biofuel, of course, is important, but we saw already before the energy crisis or the economic crisis started in 2008 that it has impacts on food prices. And in those areas where it substitutes foods, it's not a good idea to produce biofuel. However, there are also regions where farmers benefit from biofuel production. And in those areas where it does not compete with food production, it's fine. But for those areas where it is not, I would say it's difficult. So we need to find a good balance. Thank you. Thank you.